Halloween has always been one of my favorite holidays. There's something about the energy in the air, the costumes, the decorations, the way the whole world seems to embrace the weird and creepy for just one night. I've always loved going to Halloween parties, especially the ones where everyone goes all out. But last year, something happened that turned my favorite holiday into something that still sends chills down my spine. It was the night of a big Halloween party that my friend Amanda was hosting. She always threw the best parties, elaborate decorations, music, and tons of people. I dressed up as a vampire, nothing too original, but I was excited to hang out, see everyone's costumes, and just enjoy the night. The party was in full swing by the time I arrived. The house was packed with people, all dressed up in everything from spooky to silly costumes. The music was loud, and there was a thick haze of fake fog drifting through the room. I grabbed a drink, said hi to a few friends, and made my way through the crowd, enjoying the chaos of it all. About an hour in, I noticed someone standing near the corner of the room, just outside of the main action. He was dressed in a black cloak with a mask that covered most of his face, a simple white mask with dark eyes. At first, I didn't think anything of it. After all, it was Halloween, and everyone was dressed up. But as the night went on, I started to notice that he was always in the same spot, never joining the crowd, never talking to anyone. It struck me as odd. Most people at the party were dancing, laughing, or mingling, but this guy just stood there watching. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just shy, or maybe he was waiting for someone. But there was something about the way he lingered on the edges of the room that made me uncomfortable. A couple of hours later, I found myself in the kitchen with some friends, getting a refill on drinks. The conversation was light, everyone was laughing, and for a while, I forgot about the masked man in the other room. But as I glanced out toward the living room, I saw him again, still standing there, still watching. "What's up with that guy?" I asked, nodding toward the masked figure. My friend Jessica turned to look. "Who?" "That guy in the mask," I said, pointing. "He's just been standing there all night." Jessica squinted, looking confused. "I don't see anyone." I frowned and looked back toward the corner. The man was gone. A wave of unease washed over me, but I forced a laugh, telling myself I was being paranoid. "He was right there a second ago," I muttered, shaking my head. "Maybe it's just some creep," Jessica shrugged. "It's Halloween. People get weird." I tried to let it go and continued talking with my friends, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The way he had been standing there, so still, so out of place. It didn't feel like someone just having fun at a party. It felt wrong. About 30 minutes later, I decided to head outside for some fresh air. The house was getting crowded, and I needed a break from the noise. I stepped out onto the porch, letting the cool night air hit my face, and leaned against the railing. That's when I saw him. The man in the black cloak was standing at the far end of the yard, just beyond the glow of the porch lights. He was barely visible in the shadows, but I could see the faint outline of his white mask, his dark eyes fixed on me. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't seen him leave the house, and I hadn't seen him talk to anyone the entire night, so why was he standing out here, alone, staring at me? I glanced around, but no one else was outside. The party was still going strong inside, the music and laughter muffled by the walls of the house. I was alone with this stranger. "Hey," I called out, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Do you need something?" He didn't answer. He didn't move. He just stood there watching me from the darkness. A cold wave of fear washed over me. My instincts screamed at me to go back inside, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. The way he stood there, so still, so deliberate, it felt like he was waiting for something. I took a step back toward the door, my pulse quickening. "I think you should leave," I said, my voice trembling slightly. For a moment, he didn't react. Then slowly, he tilted his head to the side, as if considering my words. I turned and bolted for the door, my heart racing. I slammed it behind me, the noise of the party suddenly overwhelming. I looked back through the window, expecting to see him still standing there, but when I glanced outside, the yard was empty. I spent the rest of the night trying to enjoy the party, but the feeling of being watched never left me. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see him again lurking in the shadows. As the party started to wind down, I asked Amanda about the guy in the mask. "Do you know him?" I asked. "He's been hanging around all night, but I haven't seen him talk to anyone." Amanda frowned. "What guy?" "The one in the black cloak and mask," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "He was standing outside earlier." She shook her head. "I don't know anyone like that, and I haven't seen anyone in a mask." My stomach dropped. I spent the rest of the night scanning the house, but I never saw him again. Whoever he was, he had disappeared without a trace. To this day, I don't know if he was just some random creep who crashed the party, or if he had a more sinister reason for being there. But every time Halloween rolls around, I can't help but remember the way he watched me from the shadows, his dark eyes hidden behind that mask, and I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gone back inside when I did. Halloween has always been a big deal in my neighborhood. Every year people go all out with decorations, haunted houses, and over-the-top costumes. And like every year, there's always a group of kids, and sometimes adults, who take pranks a little too far. Toilet papering houses, fake blood splattered on cars, and people hiding in bushes to jump out at trick-or-treaters. It's all in good fun, or so we thought. But last Halloween, something happened that crossed the line. And I can't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a prank gone wrong. It was something far more sinister. I was hanging out with my best friend Kevin. We'd spent the early part of the night handing out candy to trick-or-treaters from his front porch, laughing as kids ran up to us in their costumes. Once the crowd thinned out, Kevin suggested we check out the old abandoned house at the end of the street. Now, this house had been empty for years. It was a local legend. Every neighborhood has one. People said it was haunted, that strange things happened there, especially on Halloween. But the truth was, it was just an old, run-down house that no one had lived in for decades. A perfect target for Halloween pranks. Kevin had an idea. We'd sneak up to the house, leave a couple of fake blood handprints on the windows, and maybe knock on the door a few times to scare whoever else decided to wander by. It sounded like harmless fun. Just another Halloween night with a silly prank. We grabbed some fake blood from Kevin's leftover decorations and headed down the street. It was close to midnight by the time we reached the house. The wind had picked up, making the trees sway in that eerie way that only happens on cold fall nights. The house loomed over us, dark and silent, just as creepy as I remembered from my childhood. The front yard was overgrown, the windows were dirty and cracked, and the porch sagged as if it could collapse at any moment. We climbed the steps quietly, stifling our laughter as we pulled out the fake blood. Kevin smeared some on his hands and pressed them against the front window, leaving bloody handprints that looked disturbingly real. We were just about to head around to the back of the house when we heard it, faint footsteps coming from inside. We both froze. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. The house had been abandoned for years. No one could possibly be living there. But the sound was unmistakable. Slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone was walking toward the front door from inside the house. Kevin and I exchanged nervous glances. "You hear that?" he whispered. I nodded, my pulse quickening. I tried to tell myself it was probably just an animal or the wind messing with the old wood, but the sound was too distinct, too human. Kevin, always the braver one, stepped closer to the door. "Let's knock," he whispered, grinning like he thought this was the best Halloween prank of the night. Before I could stop him, he raised his hand and gave 3 quick knocks on the old wooden door. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The wind rustled the leaves, and the street was eerily quiet. I was just about to tell Kevin we should leave when we heard it, a soft knock from inside, like someone was knocking back. Kevin's smile faded, and we both stood there, frozen, staring at the door. My heart was racing now, and the air felt heavy with something I couldn't explain. I grabbed Kevin's arm. "Let's go, man. This isn't funny." He nodded, suddenly looking just as uneasy as I felt. We started backing away from the porch, moving quickly, but trying not to make too much noise. That's when we heard it again. Those same slow footsteps from inside, but this time they were faster, heading straight for the front door. Without another word, we turned and ran, sprinting down the street as fast as we could. My heart was pounding in my chest, and all I could think about was the sound of those footsteps getting closer, chasing us down the dark, empty street. We didn't stop running until we were back at Kevin's house, out of breath and wide-eyed. We slammed the door behind us and stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. "What the heck was that?" Kevin gasped, his hands trembling. "I don't know," I replied, my voice shaking. "But I'm not going back to that house." We tried to calm down, telling ourselves it was probably just some other kids pulling a prank, maybe someone who had snuck into the house earlier and decided to mess with us. But deep down, we both knew that wasn't the case. We would have seen someone if they had gone inside before us. The place had been empty for years, and the only footprints in the dirt outside were ours. The rest of the night, neither of us could shake the feeling that something was wrong, that maybe the stories about the house weren't just rumors. Maybe there really was something, or someone, inside. We never talked about it again after that night, but I still think about those footsteps, the way they followed us, and the knock that came from inside the house. Every Halloween since, I've avoided going near that street, and I still wonder what would have happened if we had stayed just a few seconds longer. Growing up, I was the go-to babysitter in my neighborhood. I liked kids, and the extra cash was always nice, especially in high school. Halloween was usually my busiest night, with parents going to costume parties or handing out candy while I watched their little ones. It was always fun, and the kids loved it. But last year, I took a babysitting job that still gives me chills to think about. The family was new to the neighborhood. The Millers, a young couple with a 5-year-old son, Evan. I'd never met them before, but they had gotten my number from one of my regulars. So when they called me to ask if I was available to watch Evan on Halloween night, I agreed. It was just another job, or so I thought. I arrived at their house around 7 p.m. It was a cute, cozy place, tastefully decorated for Halloween with pumpkins on the porch, fake cobwebs in the corners, and a few spooky decorations in the yard. Evan was already in his costume, a little pirate outfit, and he seemed excited to go trick-or-treating. His parents were dressed up too, ready for their night out. Mrs. Miller smiled as she handed me a list of instructions. "We won't be out too late," she said. "Just take Evan around the block for trick-or-treating, then bring him back home by 8:30. He's usually in bed by 9. "No problem," I said, feeling confident. After all, I'd done this 100 times before. I grabbed my jacket, and with Evan in tow, we headed out for trick-or-treating. The evening started out perfectly normal. Evan was full of energy, running from house to house, excitedly filling his bucket with candy. The streets were filled with kids, parents, and the usual Halloween festivities. We made our way around the block, and by the time we headed back to the house, Evan was starting to get tired. It was 8:30 on the dot, just like Mrs. Miller had requested. When we got back inside, I let Evan sort through his candy while I flipped through the TV channels, finding some old Halloween cartoons for him to watch while I tidied up. Everything felt normal. But then, around 8:45, things started to get weird. It was subtle at first, just little things that didn't seem right. I'd hear a noise upstairs, like the faint creak of floorboards. But when I checked, the rooms were empty. I figured it was just the house settling or my nerves playing tricks on me. After all, it was Halloween, and the atmosphere had a way of making you feel spooked. I brought Evan upstairs to get him ready for bed, reading him a short story to help him wind down. But as I was tucking him in, I noticed he was acting a little off. He kept glancing at the closet, his eyes wide, as if he was expecting something to come out. "Is everything okay, Evan?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. He didn't respond at first, just kept staring at the closet. Finally, he whispered, "There's a man in the closet." My heart skipped a beat. I followed his gaze to the closed door, feeling a knot of dread form in my stomach. I knew it was probably just his imagination. Kids get scared on Halloween, especially after trick-or-treating, but the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. "There's no one in the closet, buddy," I said, forcing a smile. "It's just your costumes." But Evan shook his head, his voice trembling. "No, he's hiding." I swallowed hard, my nerves on edge. I didn't want to scare Evan, but I needed to show him there was nothing there. "All right," I said, standing up. "I'll check the closet for you, okay?" I walked over to the closet, my heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed the doorknob and hesitated for a second before pulling it open. The closet was empty, just clothes and toys. I sighed in relief and turned back to Evan. "See? Nothing there." But he didn't look relieved. He just stared at me, his eyes wide and unblinking. "He's hiding," he whispered again. I tried to brush it off as just an overactive imagination, but my unease was growing. I tucked Evan into bed, telling him there was nothing to worry about, and made my way back downstairs, glancing over my shoulder the whole way. As I sat down in the living room trying to relax, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Soft, deliberate footsteps on the stairs. They were slow, almost as if someone was trying not to be heard. My heart pounded as I looked up at the staircase, but I couldn't see anyone. I stood up, my hands trembling as I listened, waiting for the sound to come again. But the house was silent. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks on me. I grabbed my phone to check the time. It was 9:15. The Millers would be home soon, I reminded myself. Just a little longer, and I'd be out of here. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Someone was standing at the bottom of the stairs. At first, I thought it was Evan. But when I turned to look, the figure was gone. My pulse skyrocketed. I knew I hadn't imagined it. I had seen something, or someone. I rushed upstairs, my heart racing as I opened the door to Evan's room. He was sound asleep, curled up under the blankets, completely unaware of what was happening. I glanced at the closet, but it was still closed, just as I had left it. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. I went back downstairs, grabbed my coat, and sat by the front door, waiting for the Millers to come home. Every sound, every creak of the house sent my nerves into overdrive. I kept glancing at the stairs, half expecting to see that figure again, but nothing happened. Finally, around 9:30, the Millers came home. I was out the door before they could even ask how the night went. I never told them what happened, but I haven't babysat for them since. And every time Halloween rolls around, I can't help but remember that feeling that something or someone was in that house with me and Evan, and the way he said, "There's a man in the closet," still haunts me to this day.